Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HDM here with an update to one of our most popular builds of all time. This is going to be the hybrid Templar build, the Paladin. Now, if you have no idea what a hybrid build in ESO means, it's simply mixing a combination of abilities, magicka, and stamina using both of your resource pools to complete content. And if you like this idea, this build is going to be a great option. We're using crafted sets, a mixture of light, medium, and heavy armor, which along with our sets and skills give us a great mix of damage, passive healing, and survivability. So if you're looking for a great solo build that can take on some of the toughest content in the game, including world bosses, dungeons, and even veteran dungeons, then this is going to be the build for you. Let's jump right into it. All right, everybody, we are back with a quick update to our hybrid Templar setup. This build is called the Paladin. Been a little while since I took this build out for a test run. But things are looking good, better than ever, actually, for hybrids in 2021. So let me show you how I set this up and how it all works, starting with the basic stats. And we'll talk about buffs as well. 28,000 max magicka, almost 25,000 max health, 28,000 max stamina. Our recoveries do go up with a potion. About 1,000 magicka recovery, 800 stamina recovery. You can see our basic weapon and spell damage unbuffed. We do have Rally and Degeneration. With those, we're looking at about 6,000 weapon damage, 5,500 spell damage. Of course, we do have our Dawn's Wrath abilities for minor sorcery. That makes those just about equal. And then if you're running a back bar weapon glyph, about 6,600 weapon and spell damage on both of those. 42% or so crit chance. And then our resistances do go up with a defensive buff there, about 20,000 physical and 22,000 spell resistance. Don't worry, we have a lot of other damage mitigating factors, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But in terms of our attribute distribution on the hybrid Templar, you're looking at 24 points max magicka and then 40 points into stamina. That's about as equal as I could get things. Maybe one plus or minus one more might make it a little bit better. In terms of your buff food, there is a blue food that you can get that gives you both max magicka and max stamina. That'll give you the most of your two resources as possible. You can also run tri-stat food. It's not much of a difference, and you'll get even more health, which can be nice, especially on a solo build. So either option is good. Potions, of course, will want tri-stat potions if you can get those. That just gives you the most sustain possible since you will be using all of your resources on a hybrid setup. Now, in terms of the Mundus, doing something a little bit different, we actually have 2 Mundus stones, which we'll talk about in a minute, how you get those. But we're using the Thief, first of all. Thief Mundus gives you weapon and spell critical, so it's pretty good for hybrids. It's basically 2 buffs in 1. That's equivalent to like an extra Mother Sorrow. You know, if you look at that crit chance rating, it's pretty good. And we're also combining that with the Lover Mundus, since this is a solo build. Having the extra penetration is going to equal more damage. And of course, you get both the physical and spell resistance debuffs with that Mundus. So basically your best 2 hybrid Munduses, in my opinion, and we're able to run both with a specific set. And then in terms of the race, I think High Elf is really good for this type of build. Now you've got obviously Elemental Talent. That's weapon and spell damage, so that's great for hybrids. You got some extra max magicka, so you need to put more points into stamina, but that's fine. And then spell recharge is actually really good for hybrid sustain because you get magicka or stamina back every 6 seconds based on whichever is the lowest. Plus you get some extra damage mitigation when you're channeling, which our main spammable on the Templar, of course, is a channeled ability. So all around, High Elf is pretty good for this type of build. I think that covers all the basic stuff. We can talk about gear next. What are we using to make this work? Well, we've got sort of the classic hybrid damage setup. New Moon Acolyte is a crafted set. You need 9 traits to craft this, by the way. It gives you lots of good stats. Crit chance, weapon and spell damage, penetration, 400 bonus weapon and spell damage at the cost of 5% increase to your active abilities. So you do feel this more than like a pure magicka or stamina build because your resource pools are lower. You can see we were about 28k magicka and max stamina. So you will feel the cost increase slightly. But I still feel like even with that, just the raw stats here are very good because they're buffing both your physical damage and your elemental damage. So this is a really good set still to run on hybrids. Of course, we've got the Nirnhone trait for even more damage. We've got the Greatsword. Greatsword has passive damage as well. We'll talk about that when we get to the passive section. And then Absorb Magic as the enchant. You can flip this to absorb stamina. It just depends on what you feel is draining you the most in terms of your abilities. Since we are going to be using Puncturing Sweep, a Magicka ability, I just figured Absorb Magic going to help the most with sustain. And then, of course, the new Moon Acolyte jewelry. I've got these actually crafted in Triune. I thought this would be pretty good. Gives you all of your max stats. 2 weapon damage bonuses here. No spell damage bonuses. The reason for that is because we get Minor Sorcery as a Magicka Templar, so you're already getting extra spell damage anyways. So 2 weapon damage bonuses will help to balance that a little bit. And then 1 extra Magicka Recovery. Again, you can flip this to Stamina Recovery. You could do Reduced Cost, whatever you feel like you need after you tested it a bit yourself. Now for the second set, this is how we get that double Mundus. And this is the old school crafted Twice Born Star set. This comes from the zone of Craglorn. Gives you max health, max stamina, max magicka, and you can have 2 bonus Mundus stones at the same time. So again, using Lover and Thief to make this work. Previously on this build, if you are familiar with it, I used to run Pelinal. Pelinal is decent for certain activities, specifically like grinding or arenas where you have a lot of enemies that you're fighting. But for things that are a little bit slower paced, like let's say dungeons, veteran dungeons, world bosses, where you don't have a lot of ads, I think Pelinal is not as good anymore. So we switched this over to something that's going to give us a lot of stats, which would be Twice Born Star, running 2 Munduses at once. Now, in terms of the weights here, especially in Waking Flame, the DLC coming up, where we have different bonuses now for armor, you can mix up your armor weights a lot. And specifically because these sets are crafted, you have total freedom as far as what weights you want to run, which is actually pretty cool. So we're starting off with the heavy chest. We've got 1 piece of heavy. We've got medium legs. So again, we're getting a little bit extra armor bonus from the medium legs. And then 3 pieces of light. So light feet, hands, and waist. For the Twice Born Star set, again, we've got tri-stat enchants on as many pieces as possible, just for that little extra bonus of stats. It's actually more efficient, right? It's about 50% more efficient than either a full max magicka or a full max stamina glyph. And then in terms of the monster helm, I went with something a little bit different that's going to help out with sustain as well as crit chance. So Grundwolf is a pretty interesting monster set. It gives you the 1-piece crit chance bonus, which is definitely nice since it applies to both of our damage types. And then for the 2-piece, whenever you deal critical damage, you're going to restore resources. So 700 magicka or stamina, whichever maximum is higher. So you can play around with your stats and your resource pools to figure out basically which one will get the 700 and which pool will get the 350. I made my magicka pool slightly higher so that I get more max magicka back. And again, that's just because our main spammable skill is going to be a magicka ability. So Grundwolf, Head and Shoulders, that's a nice sustain option for this hybrid type of setup. I definitely would consider that. If you're looking into playing a hybrid, maybe pick this up. You could also do more defensive sets, maybe something like Bloodspawn, Pirate Skeleton, since this is a solo build. That's going to be good for more damage mitigation. And if you want to push out the damage, if you want to get higher DPS on this build, something like Balorg, since that gives you both spell and weapon damage and both forms of penetration, Balorg would be a nice offensive set. Now for a full list of alternate gear options, make sure you check out the written guide. I have a link for that down in the description and the pinned comments. That'll give you more options too if you want to check those out. And then last but not least, back bar weapon, Maelstrom Bow. Just a super simple option for a solo build. And of course you want the infused trait if you can get it with a weapon and spell damage enchant. This is great for hybrids. It gives you a ton more weapon and spell damage as long as you're using that bow ability on your back bar. I think that's it. I think that's the setup. New Moon Acolyte, weapon and jewelry. Back bar Maelstrom. Twice Born Star on the body with the Grundwolf monster set. I forgot to mention the weights here on the monster set. Medium, medium. So when you're looking at the overall weights, 1 heavy, 3 pieces of medium, so head, shoulders, and legs, and then 3 pieces of light. We'll talk about this more when we look at the passives, but basically you can get bonuses from both light and medium armor passives a little bit more equally, at least as long as you're not using a armor ability, which we are not. All right, skills next. Starting on the front bar, 2H. We've got Reverse Slice. This is going to be your execute. Now you can also slot Radiant Glory, which is the Magicka-based Templar execute. Either one is very effective. I would say if you're doing dungeons with a lot of enemies, use the 2H execute because it does splash damage. If you're doing world bosses, like solo fights, single target, then switch over to Radiant Glory. So it kind of depends on the situation. Next up, we got Brawler from the two-handed skill line. This is just a very easy damage shield. Gives you a huge damage shield if you hit enough enemies. We're also going to be buffing that up a little bit through champion points. So it is very strong for solo builds. I definitely recommend that. And then we got Camouflage Hunter. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. Second to last ability here, and we want this for Major Savagery. That increases our weapon critical rating. Plus you also get Minor Berserk, which is not bad. But since we are using Tri-Stat Potions, there's really no other good way to get that weapon critical buff. So we do need that slotted on the front bar. Next up, our main DPS ability, Puncturing Sweep, comes from Adric's Spear. First ability here. And this is really a great damage and survival tool. It's really nice to mix this in on the Hybrid Templar because of all the healing. You can see you heal for 40% of the damage done with that ability. It's also AoE, so it's really great for grinding XP or going through dungeons solo. Great all-around skill. Then our final normal ability is going to be Rally. Right here, this is the final ability from the two-handed skill line. Why Rally? Well, we don't have another source of Major Brutality, which is a huge buff. 20% bonus weapon damage plus a minor endurance. 15% bonus stamina recovery. Templars have less flexibility on the hybrid setup compared to other classes because they don't have a class source of either Major Brutality or Major Sorcery. So we do need to run 2H on this setup unless you want to use like weapon power potions, but just the easiest way I think is with Rally. Plus you get that Juicy Burst heal, which is pretty nice on your front bar since you don't have any other burst heal on this particular loadout. And then finally, the ultimate Flawless Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild skill line. This, of course, is great because you get more weapon and spell damage. 300 bonus damage for 20 seconds. I forgot about this buff, actually. So you'll get well over 7k weapon and spell damage with this going, which is quite nice. Extra dot damage, AoE damage too, so it's pretty good. Even on other classes for a hybrid setup, you might think about this because of all the bonuses that you get. You also get passive weapon damage from these, which we'll talk about in a minute. Let's switch to back bar. Starting off with our bow ability, Endless Hail. That's the second ability from the bow skill line. You need this to proc your weapon glyph. That's why it's there. It is the longest lasting in terms of those back bar buffs, whether it's like two-handed back bar, dual back bar. The bow is just easiest to manage. It's also going to line up nicer with our other back bar dot, which is Vampire's Bane. It has a 16-second duration. That skill comes from Dawn's Wrath. First ability here. So this is single targets, but it's very good for bosses. And you also get some nice buffs from this. So Major Prophecy is spell critical. That's about 10 to 12% spell critical. And so when we use this ability, that's going to put that buff on our bar for spell critical. And then when we're on the front bar, we also get our weapon, passive weapon critical from Camouflage Hunter. So we're getting both sources of our major crit buff, which is important. So make sure you have this up just for that buff. You also get Minor Sorcery from Dawn's Wrath abilities. That's an extra 10% spell damage. So yeah, a lot of good passives come from that skill just by casting it one time. Then we have Honor the Dead. This is kind of a flex spot on the back bar. Honor the Dead is a nice burst heal, comes from the Restoring Light skill line. It's just nice if you happen to get stuck on your back bar. Let's say you get knocked down or something, and the first skill that you need to cast is a heal. Instead of worrying about swapping to your front bar for Rally, you got that burst heal on the back bar in case you need it. You can also swap in other things for more damage. You could do like Trap from the Fighters Guild skill line. You could do Blazing Spear from the Adric Spear skill line. Any type of dot that you want in the back bar would be good. Next up, another buff from Mage's Guild. We've got Degeneration. This gives us major sorcery, so that's our 20% bonus spell damage buff. That's also very important as well. So I think I showed you before. To buff your damage, you have two buffs that you need to maintain. So Rally is weapon damage. Degeneration is spell damage. So keep that in mind. And then our final normal ability is going to be Channeled Focus. This is our Major Resolve, so that's our armor buff. A little bit of a bonus heal over time when we're standing in it, which is quite good for soloing. And then we do get extra Magicka recovery as well. Now, if you feel like you need more healing and stamina recovery, you can actually switch to the other morph. The stamina morph, I believe, gives you a higher heal per second, and you get stamina recovery instead of Magicka recovery. So play around with the values, play around with your sustain, and you can always switch that up if you want. Two good options for the back bar. You can use Empowering Sweep. You get some bonus critical damage from the passive that you get from Adric's Spear. If you want to do more difficult content, more challenging content, I would probably do Solar Disturbance here. This gives you the major maim debuff for a long time, plus a lot of good AoE damage over time. Pretty strong ultimate, though it is costly, about 200 plus ultimate for that. So up to you there, but you have some good options for sure. Once we cover the abilities, we can talk about a basic rotation. Now, we talked about the buffs already. Rally and Degeneration are your damage. Rune is your defense and your sustain. From there on the back bar, you can apply your two dots. So you got your Endless Hail, Vampire's Bane, bar swap. You can go right into your DPS skill, which is Puncturing Sweep at that point, or something that I will do for like veteran content if I'm trying to solo a vet dungeon. Back bar dots go right into a Brawler, so you get that nice damage shield. If you have like 2 or 3 enemies at a time, you'll get a full damage shield for the full amount of your health, because that does scale up with the amount of enemies hit. So again, Rally, Degen, and your Rune are your buffs. Back bar dots are Endless Hail and Vampire's Bane, and then your DPS abilities up front. Brawler, Puncturing Sweeps. Use your ultimate when it's ready to buff your damage even further. So that's the basic setup. Now, what about passives? This becomes even more important on a hybrid build for ESO, and passives are actually changing too in a lot of interesting ways. So let's dive into these. You'll want basically all of Adric's Spear. You get bonus crit damage. You get minor protection for 6 seconds when you use your sweep. That's an important buff for solo builds. Burning Light is even more damage. And then Balance Warrior is actually getting changed for the Waking Flame DLC. Gives you now weapon and spell damage, physical and spell resistance. So this is great for hybrids. Gives you a lot of good stats. Make sure you pick that one up as soon as possible. Dawn's Wrath, we talked a little bit about the bonuses that you get. You get more ultimate from Prism. Illuminate, this is the one that gives you minor sorcery. So you want to make sure you cast Vampire's Bane. And then Restoring Spirit is actually really good for cost reduction. This kind of negates the extra cost of running New Moon Acolyte as a gear set, because you get 5% cost reduction from this passive. Restoring Light, these are more of your like healing and defensive focused ones. You can pick these all up as well. These will be good for group play also. For the two-handed skill line, pick up all of these as well. You get extra sustain, extra cost reduction. From Balance Blade, a really good one that you want, Heavy Weapons. This gives us 284 bonus weapon and spell damage. So that's another great one for hybrids. I think probably in most cases, hybrids would prefer a greatsword because of that bonus. And then, of course, all your bow passives, you'll want those. Now let's talk about light armor passives. I think light armor is a little bit better overall this patch. That's because Concentration gives you physical and spell penetration. Prodigy gives you a little bit extra weapon and spell crit chance. The crit chance was actually removed from medium armor and replaced with critical damage. So I'm trying to get like the best of everything because I'm running 3 light, 3 medium, and 1 heavy. So I'm getting a lot of good bonuses that way. So I am getting some extra pen. I'm getting some extra crit chance. getting some extra spell resistance. I'm getting extra magicka recovery and magicka cost reduction. And again, this is just with 3 pieces of light. And then if you look at medium, I'm running 3 pieces of medium, so I'm getting crit damage done. I'm getting extra stam recovery and stam cost reduction. I'm getting 6% bonus weapon damage. Remember, this did change to per piece worn. So it used to be you had to wear 5 pieces of medium to get this. That's no longer the case. You get the bonus per piece worn, and it's now weapon and spell damage. So having a couple pieces of medium is actually good for a hybrid build. And then I get sprint cost reduction, roll dodge cost reduction. So 3 and 3. I don't know. I'm trying it out. I think it's pretty good. Obviously, that's going to be more possible if you're running crafted sets. You won't have quite as many options if you're running like a 5-piece medium set or a 5-piece light. But this is just a good thing you can try with a crafted setup like this. And of course, the 1 piece of heavy. Get some extra stats from that as well. Although that's mostly from the Undaunted passive, which we'll look at in a second. Fighters Guild. This is actually good for hybrids now. Check out the Slayer passive. This got updated. 3% bonus weapon and spell damage for each Fighters Guild ability slotted. This gives us bonus 6% to both, which is really cool. You also get ultimate back whenever you kill an enemy. Sigic Order, nothing there. Nothing there. Undaunted. You'll want Undaunted Metal. Increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor. That's 6% bonus to all your stats. That's really powerful on a hybrid. Definitely get that. Racial skills, we talked about those. You need those. And then alchemy, you'll want medicinal use for the extra potion duration. Champion point time. Let's check it out, starting in the green tree. I'm using my basic green tree setup. Not much has changed. I always start with 50 points Steed's Blessing for the extra movement speed. 50 points Gilded Fingers for the extra gold. And then work your way up to Steadfast Enchantment. This one is really good to make your weapon enchants last longer. Treasure Hunter, of course, extra quality of items. Rationer makes your food last longer. Liquid Efficiency, this gives you a chance not to consume a potion, which is great with expensive tri-stat potions. And then Breakfall, if you have any extra points. Reduce fall damage is pretty good in some situations. Now, Blue Tree is where it gets interesting. We are using Precision and then going into Piercing for the offensive penetration. I would come right back out and then get your damage stars right away. So Biting Aura buffs jabs. Biting Aura is a great bonus for the Puncturing Sweep ability, as is Mastered Arms. Both of these buff that ability by 10%. So those are the main ones I would get as soon as possible. You can also get something like Untamed Aggression. This is great for hybrids also because it buffs your weapon and spell damage. You can also play around with the other version of that, which is Wrathful Strikes. You'll get a little bit more, but that only applies to your offensive abilities. From there, if you have any more points, pick up Tireless Discipline and Eldritch Insight because this gives you your max resource bonuses to both stamina and magicka. And then we come down into here. So you notice I saved a slotted blue star, and that's because I'm picking up Ironclad. Ironclad is a new star that's coming in the Wake in Flame DLC. This reduces all of your damage taken from direct attacks by 10%. So if you really want to like solo dungeons, where bosses, a lot of the damage they do is just that direct damage from light and heavy attacks, this will be pretty good for soloing. So I did try it out. I am liking it. If you feel like you don't need it, if you don't need the extra mitigation, you can pick up Thaumaturge for the extra dot damage. That would be pretty good on this build too. And then these are just passive, so you don't need a slot for these. Quick Recovery, Elemental Aegis, Preparation, and Hardy. If you have more points, there's also some things you can get in here, like Mighty and War Mage. You'll probably want both of these as a hybrid, so you will need a few extra points. By the way, if you want the full breakdown of 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP, I'll have that over on the written guide. Again, just click the link in the description or the pinned comment to check that out. Finally, for the red tree, we're going to start off with Boundless Vitality. Extra health is always good for solo builds. You should always pick this up. Fortified, it's now called Fortified. It was Ironclad. This is going to give you the bonus armor, which again, armor is good for soloing. Rejuvenation got a little bit of a nerf in the Wake in Flame DLC. You'll see slightly less recovery here, but you get it all the time. So I think it's still decent, especially for a hybrid where you need all of these resources. And then for your 4th slotted star, really up to you. I am liking Bastion on this build. This is going to buff my Brawler damage shield, which is pretty nice. If you're doing like a lot of XP grinding or dungeon runs with a lot of enemies, you could pick either Siphoning Spells or Bloody Renewal. This is going to give you that resource back, 1500 back to that resource, whichever one you want. And then for passives, we got Sprinter, Hasty. By this way, this looks a little bit different. On the Waking Flame PTS, you have new slotted stars, but for soloing, they're not super great. Hero's Vigor for the extra health. Tumbling, Defiance, Tireless Guardian, and Fortification. So there you go. That is the CP loadout. Outfit style, if you're curious what this looks like, helmet is heavy Aldmeri. Body pieces are, for the most part, Abba's Watch. So we got the medium chest, medium shoulders, light gloves, light waist, heavy legs, light boots. And then the weapon here, the 2H, is called Blackfin Legion. So there you go. All right, everybody. And with that, that's going to wrap up the Hybrid Templar Paladin build update for the Elder Scrolls Online. Now, there are a few things I didn't have time for, including where to get the alternate gear and then companion builds. If you'd like to see any of that, it's all detailed in the written guide. Again, the link for that is in the description and the pinned comment if you want to check it out. Finally, I did record all of my build testing for this setup, including a full solo run-through of the Veteran Dungeon Banished cells for our channel members. So if you're part of our Tier 2 Elite Squad, make sure to check out that gameplay. I'll have a link for that in the description as well. And if you're not a member yet, you can definitely check it out by clicking on that join button for more information. We have plenty more exclusive solo builds and more gameplay to come. But that's it for today. If you liked the video, don't forget to crush that like button. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.